Welcome back. All right, so with the Avalanche done, now I'm going to talk about the Quebec Nordiques. Looking way back, of course, so for a lot of people that are watching this, probably weren't born when the Quebec Nordiques were around, or maybe you don't remember them. So I guess this would be a refresher or an introduction, depending on how you look at it. So jumping right in at number 20, it's a goaltender. You're right. It is difficult to find an 80s goaltender that THG didn't root for. Mario Gosselin played behind some not great Quebec Nordiques teams. What I liked about the Quebec Nordiques, honestly, I really liked how many players had very French names. And Mario Gosselin was one of them. Honestly, I thought that was great. It felt like this was a team that was kind of on its own. And, if you had a really French sounding name, you may very well end up being a Quebec Nordique. I had no problem with that whatsoever. In fact, there's an honorable mention to Claude Lapointe in this video. Didn't quite make it. I thought about going to 21, but that was reserved for only one I've gone to 21 with is the Vancouver Canucks. All right, number 19. I did catch the tail end of his time with the team. Good scorer, Réal Cloutier. Réal Cloutier, I believe, played for them in the WHA as well. I did not watch the WHA. The WHA preceded my time watching hockey. But Réal Cloutier was a gifted forward during an era where there were a lot of gifted forwards. There was a lot of scoring going on. Cloutier coming in 19th on my countdown. At 18th, it's another goaltender who also played behind some pretty rough teams in Quebec. Although when things started turning around, Stephane Fiset, as I remember, was there too. Fiset was a good goaltender. His stats weren't necessarily fantastic because he played in Quebec. But I do remember Fiset, I felt like was a bit underrated because he played in Quebec. Not the only goaltender who I felt like got a bit underrated for playing in Quebec. I could almost fill this board, though, with goaltenders they used during that really tough period over about 3 years. There was one year, I think they used 7 different goaltenders. It was 6 or 7, something along those lines. Stephane Fiset, though, was one of the best that they had, in my opinion. Number 17. So another one that I just basically caught the tail end of his career. He played a lot in the WHA. Marc Tardif was a star in the WHA. Scored a ton of goals and points, which the National Hockey League does not recognize. So Marc Tardif, a very good player on the Quebec Nordiques. Sadly, I only caught him at the tail end of his time with the Nordiques. But there it is, another Marc Tardif, or Tardif, right? Marc Tardif is what I've always called him. But yeah, very, very French names. And I think that's great. I do. I think that's awesome. Number 16. So he'd be higher up, but I'm going to say this. He'll be higher up when I get to the Sharks list, and that's Owen Nolan. I remember Owen Nolan's first year in the National Hockey League, and there was a lot of hype around him, and then he scored 3 goals. And there was a ton of people questioning whether or not he was ready for the National Hockey League, whether or not Quebec was ruining him. And then the following season, he got a lot better. He started scoring a lot more. Nolan wasn't a Nordique for that long, but he got his start there. He was very good for them up until the trade. And so, yeah, Nolan is my number 16 pick for the Quebec Nordiques. Number 15. I can't lose count. That can't happen. All right, what did I say about French names? Yep. Normand, Rochefort. Defenseman, played for the Nordiques for a long time. They had a really strong team in the early 80s. The early 80s they did. In the mid 80s, I really wanted them to win a cup. To this day, I would be so happy if the Nordiques had been able to win a Stanley Cup. The Battle of Quebec was fantastic. And, of course, I picked the Nordiques in that Battle of Quebec. See, the interesting thing is, if we do see at some point in time a Nordiques return, I would have a hard time not making them my third favorite team. I think they'd bump Dallas down. That's how much I'd be excited to see the Nordiques back. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think the NHL is interested. And if the NHL is not interested and the owners aren't interested, and if you don't have somebody offering up, it looks like $2 billion US for an expansion team, it's not going to happen. But if against all odds they got a team, I absolutely would very likely have Vancouver, Boston, Quebec as my 3 favorite teams, even though Quebec would probably be in the same division as Boston again. Number 14, as I remember, they didn't like each other very much. Number 14. So there were 3 Stastnys who were prominent. And I was excited when Marian Stastny was coming over, because I was like, well, I like Anton and Peter, so Marian's got to fit right in. It's interesting if you know the history of this family, and that Marian came in, he was the older brother of the 3. So did that kind of mess things up a little bit? That was the word at the time. But I like Marian Stastny a lot. In fact, I never had a Marian Stastny hockey card, so I made one. I made myself a Marian Stastny hockey card. It was one of those things I did. If there was a player I really liked, like from Vancouver, Rick Hines was their backup goaltender for a bit, so I made myself a Rick Hines hockey card. But Marian Stastny was one that I rooted for. Ultimately, he wasn't in Quebec for that long, because he was older by the time he got to Quebec, right? But still entertaining, and seeing all 3 of them on a line together, that was fun. Can't hate on that. Number 13. No, that's a real name. Marois. Defenseman who bounced around the league a little bit, but he had a nice run with the Quebec Nordiques. Played with Toronto, Winnipeg. I think he was in Vancouver for a bit too. But Marois, most of my memory of Marois' time in the National Hockey League is when he was in Quebec. Good defenseman, scored a bunch of points. I would say something about his defensive play, but it was the 80s. What is defense? So, Marois, good offensively minded defenseman for a Nordiques team that at times benefited from it. And, so he's number 13 on my list. Number 12. Wilf Paiement. Wilf Paiement was one of those ones that I thought he was a really good player. And I honestly thought, point production was there as well. I should give an honorable mention to Walt Podubny. Podubny, as I remember it, and he's not on my list, obviously I'm giving him an honorable mention here, but Podubny was one of the ones, not very French-sounding name though, Walt Podubny, whereas Wilf Paiement, absolutely, yes. But similar players in that I really rooted for them, the points were there at times, and their careers didn't end up being as long as I had figured they would be. Number 11. Alain Cote was a reliable forward, pretty consistent in his scoring. Good defensive forward, too, as I remember it. And is another French-named player on this very French team. I don't know that if you did bring the Nordiques back, if they could do that again. I don't know that there are enough French-Canadian players that Quebec could, corral that they could do that again. But I'd love to see them try. At any rate, Alain Cote just outside the top 10 for me. But I was a fan of his. What I liked was how consistent he was. Number 10. So, he had a good run with the Nordiques. He was a number 1 draft pick. And so Matt Sundin comes in at number 10. Sundin had a good start, and then eventually he gets traded off to the Toronto Maple Leafs in a deal that, shook the hockey world at the time. Wendell Clark being in a Quebec jersey it was different. Clark doesn't make the top 20. Sundin does. He was very good right out of the gate. Sundin, as a number 1 draft pick, the pressure was on him. It's a Canadian market. And I can't imagine it's easy for a Swedish hockey player. You've got all these markets which are predominantly English-speaking. And then you've got where you're playing at home, very French. So, Matt Sundin, number 10. Number 9. A current announcer for the Florida Panthers. Randy Moller. Randy Moller was a very good defenseman. Physical defenseman, too, as I remember it. Back in 82, 83, I think that was... it would have been 83. I got a box of hockey cards. The first card I pulled was Randy Moller's rookie card. I think that was 83. And so that was kind of fun. But Moller, solid defensive defenseman. I rooted for him. Moller ended up going to the Rangers after that too, I do believe. But yeah, he was never a big offensive defenseman, but very good defensively, and I was a fan. Number 8. Now, this is a divisive name, and I understand that people really don't like Dale Hunter. The incident in the playoffs, the hit from behind that ended up seeing him get suspended 21 games, is the kind of incident that drops players down on my list. There are some players that I have kept off of my favorite players list because I felt they were dirty players. They weren't players that I rooted for. Hunter, it's so hard because he had over 1,000 points. He had over 3,000 penalty minutes. I hated that incident in 93. It was a good thing that Turgeon was okay. Hunter would probably be number 1 on this list if it wasn't for that incident. That incident does drop him down for me personally, but he still has to be on the list for me. So it's one of those tricky things. Dale Hunter, number 8 on the list. Number 7. Goaltender. Dan Bouchard had been playing in Atlanta, but Bouchard, that is a French name. Off to Quebec you go. Dan Bouchard, good goaltender. One as well that I felt was kind of underrated because he played in Quebec. But he had some good seasons there. And, yeah, I was always a fan of Dan Bouchard. Great masks during Dan Bouchard's career as well, as I remember it. Number 6. Anton Stastny. Stastny came in after Peter, and Anton Stastny wasn't as talented as Peter, but he was still a point-per-game player, and a lot of fun to watch. And the chemistry between the Stastnys was just fantastic. They did have some good playoff runs there. Like I said, sadly didn't get to the final and end up winning one. But, man, during the battles of Quebec and so I remember it like Quebec and Hartford, Quebec and Boston, basically anything involving 2 teams from the Adams division, you were in for a treat. You were in to see some fights. You might end up seeing a bench-clearing brawl, and you would be highly entertained. So the Stastnys were skilled players during an era where, yeah, there were still bench-clearing brawls. Number 5. Always got to make sure I'm writing this correctly. I'm pretty practiced, though, at writing Leschyshyn. I'm sad that the current player with the last name Leschyshyn has not caught on at the National Hockey League level, has not become a regular, because Curtis Leschyshyn was fantastic. Curtis Leschyshyn was one of my favorite defensive defensemen in the National Hockey League, and I will accept zero slander of Curtis Leschyshyn on this channel. None. Leschyshyn is, like, if I was ranking top 20 defensemen in the National Hockey League back then, Leschyshyn would have been on the list, and the 1991 internet would have had a meltdown. And so, yeah, Leschyshyn was a player that I liked quite a bit, and it was that defensive game. At a time when defense was optional, Leschyshyn was picking that option. 3rd on the list. This one won't surprise anybody. This is 4th on the list. All right, am I doing 3 and 4 at the same time? Sure, let's do this. All right, so 3, since I started writing his name, and people watching are going to be like, well, there's only one Clint I know that played for the team. Clint Malarchuk. So Clint's number 3 on the list. I'll go back and get to number 4. Excellent goaltender who went through that scary incident, of course, with a skate cut, survived that, thank the Lord. But Clint Malarchuk was also a very good goaltender, and I had nothing but respect for him. As you can see, there's a number of goaltenders on this list. I am not one that buys into this idea that, well, 80s goaltenders just sucked, and so they shouldn't be considered anything. I completely vehemently disagree with that. Clint Malarchuk was a good goaltender on a Quebec Nordiques team that sometimes wasn't necessarily great, but I never had a problem with Malarchuk's game. Which brings me to 4th on the list as we go backwards a little bit. got to be another French name. Michel Goulet. Michel Goulet, excellent goal scorer. He recorded a ton of goals. I think it was almost 500 with Quebec, and then I think he had to go to Chicago to get that 500th goal, I think. But Michel Goulet, very good goal scorer, one of the best wingers in the National Hockey League at his peak, and was a ton of fun to watch on the ice. Really, absolutely. So number 2 on the list, another goaltender. And for all the snickering that people do at the name Ron Tugnutt, and I get it, I get it. But the reality is, Ron Tugnutt was my favorite goaltender for a stretch there. And the 73 saves he had at the Boston Garden that one night in a 3-3 tie against Boston. And the Boston Garden faithful gave him a standing ovation. I mean, Tugnutt to me was a legend because at no point in time did he skate off the ice, throw his blocker at one of his teammates, and say, I'm out of here, I'm done. And I don't think anybody would have blamed him because he was a good goaltender behind a team that was objectively not good. And so it is like, it's the Ryan Miller thing in Vancouver too, where Ryan Miller was very composed on Vancouver teams that weren't necessarily great, won a lot of respect there. Tugnutt to me was the ultimate example of that. His numbers took a beating because he played on the Nordiques. He would have been forgiven for saying, look, I want out of here. And he did. A lot of teams employed him, so there were definitely GMs that would have called if Quebec had made him available. But he just played through it. He never complained that I remember. Which brings us to number 1. Number 1's probably going to be pretty obvious. In that, I've talked about the Stastnys, how much fun they were to watch. And that would mean Peter Stastny's number 1 on my list. Peter Stastny, very enjoyable player to watch play hockey for many years. And he ended up moving on to St. Louis and then New Jersey. Quebec went through some dark times in the late 80s. They really did, which led to a really rough time of it in the early 90s. And then, of course, they move in the mid-90s. And then the Avalanche win the Stanley Cup. So, in the end, it's not a very happy story for the Quebec Nordiques. But Peter Stastny was there for some very good times and was a key player for them for a long time as well. And, nothing but respect for Peter Stastny and for everything he did for the Quebec Nordiques organization. And to me, he's kind of the ultimate Nordique. So if I was getting a Nordiques jersey with a number on the back, I would very likely pick Stastny's. But I don't have a Nordiques jersey with a number on the back. Hopefully we get a team in Quebec City at some point again, and then I can do that. So fingers crossed for that. Legitimately fingers crossed. When I talk in news videos like it's not going to happen or it's expansion videos say it's not going to happen, it's not me saying that. It's the National Hockey League saying that and me just saying, yeah, I understand what they're saying, but I want a team back in Quebec City. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.